Thank you all for being here today. I think most of you know I'm Julie Schaefer, Director of Legislative Affairs at the Chamber. Cynthia is sorry she couldn't be with us today, but she had a death in the family and had to go out of town suddenly. Today we are having our Administrator Forum, which is actually the first in a series of what we are now calling Policymaker Series. So all of our public policy events will be under that umbrella. You can look for that going forward. We hope to do these sort of things periodically, these smaller luncheon types with our local leaders, because even though they tend to be behind the scenes more, they are a critical part of growing our region. So we're really happy that they could be here today. I wanted to mention a couple of other events that we're having. Next month on November 9th is the Economic Summit at Shenandoah University from 8:30 to 12. We're going to have Tom Barkin from the Virginia Federal Reserve, Jason L. Kuby from Virginia Economic Development, some local business leaders, and we're just talking everything economy. I think it'll be really insightful, and we would love it if you could make that. December 5th, we're having a federal legislative luncheon at the Winchester Country Club. So we'll have a brand new congressman at that point, either Ben Cline or Jennifer Lewis, and they will be joining us, as well as some representatives from Senator Warner and Senator Kane's office. And then on January 17th, it's Chamber Day in Richmond. So we're going to get a group together, travel to Richmond, and visit with Delegate Wiley, Delegate LaRock, Delegate Gudaitis, and Senator Vogel, and see them working in their space up in Richmond. And this will be our last time with that group in particular. With the redistricting and the election next year, that will change. So we hope that you will consider joining us for that as well. So the way this will work is I'm going to introduce our panelists and let them say a few words. Yeah, we switched up the order, so I'm gonna. And then we have some pre-planned questions, and we will take questions from the audience at the end if there's time. There's also some papers at each of your tables. If at any time during this forum, if you would like to write some questions down, pass them to one of the staff members. We'll try to get all of the questions answered. And one last plug, if you are interested in public policy and you want to have a say in how these events go and our legislative priorities for the year, which is now under review from our board, please consider joining the committee. We meet once a month. We have some committee members here who would be happy to talk to you about that. We also have some board members here. I'd like to thank them for being here. Jim Geiswhite, Katrina Mead, Tom Stambulis, and John Fox, who is also a past chair and a new local business owner. He will be helping me with the questions at the end. So, without further ado, since we are limited on time, I would like to introduce to you Chris Boyce. He grew up in the Shenandoah Valley. He has his bachelor's and master's degree in public administration from James Madison University and a doctor of education from Shenandoah University. He started his career in Shenandoah County as zoning administrator, was promoted to planning director, left to be the town manager in Newmarket before going to Laurel Ridge Community College as vice president of financial and administrative services. He worked at George Mason University as assistant vice president before taking the Clark County job 3 years ago. He's been involved in a number of civic and nonprofits, including Rotary, chair of the Shenandoah County Chamber of Commerce, Laurel Ridge Foundation Board, and various school committees in Shenandoah County. He has 3 daughters, one in high school, one in middle school, and one in elementary. So welcome, Chris, and look forward to hearing from you.
Well, it's an honor to be with you all today, especially with these folks. We've got some experienced administrators here. I always learn a lot from these two guys. So it's nice to be here, and it's a privilege to be in Clark County. I think Clark County is a great place. I've worked a number of different places, as you've heard, but it's all about service to our community. That's what we come into work to do every day. We have a very small staff, but it's a dedicated staff that tries to do a lot to serve our community, and we think we do that pretty well. Clark County is a little unique. It's 15,000 people, which makes it one of the smaller counties in Virginia. out of the 95 counties, I think we're about 24th when it comes to population as far as being on the small side. We're 178 square miles, which makes us the sixth smallest county as far as land area. So that creates some challenges for us because we have to provide the same level of service and we have to follow the same regulatory requirements that Frederick has to, but we have a lot less staff to do that. So we have offices of 2 or 3 people, and they don't get to really specialize in any one area. So we have folks that are generalists all over. Virginia is a little interesting when you look at population. We're 7 times bigger than the smallest county in Virginia, which is Highland County, which only has 2,000 people. And Fairfax County, which is the largest county in population, is 75 times bigger than us. So there's a lot of dispersion of the population across Virginia. It's always interesting to look at our peers and what they're facing and the challenges they have. Clark County has a median household income, though, of $86,000, which is pretty high for this area. We're right beside Loudoun County, one of the richest counties in the country. But the numbers get a little skewed when you're so small because we have some very rich people in Clark County, which kind of mess with our average. We actually receive less school funding per student than Loudoun County does because of the composite index. So the richest county, one of the richest counties in the country, actually gets more school funding than we do in Clark County because of our small population, but a couple very rich folks that are there. Um, Speaking of our schools, we have a great relationship with our schools. We like it when other counties are fighting with their schools because it makes us all look better. But we have generally one of the highest graduation rates in the state of Virginia. But part of that's because we're so small. We can chase down those 2 or 3 or 4 students that are not on pace to graduate on time, and we can get them the help they need, which is kind of the beauty of being in a small place. 25% of our county is in conservation easement. So we get a little bit of a hard time about not being business friendly. And we're not in the sense that we're not going to rezone farms to industrial parks and things like that. And there's a strong desire to keep things in agriculture and to keep things rural. And we actually have a purchase of development rights program where we actually pay for people to put in conservation easements. So that's an important thing in our community. But we are business friendly in a lot of ways. So our tax structure is favorable to businesses. We don't have a B-pole tax. No offense to you guys, but we don't have that. So if you want to come to Clark County, our real estate tax is pretty low. Our personal property tax is low. Mr. Clater would say we need to work on our water and sewer rates, which hookup fees, we're working on that with him to get some things moving at the Waterloo intersection. We're also trying to work with Frederick County to develop some properties at Double Tollgate. You have the Camp 7 property that's been there sitting idle for many years, and we're trying to take some control of that property and get some economic development activities there. We needed water and sewer, so we've worked with Frederick County on that, and they've been a gracious partner for that. And the number one complaint that we get in Clark County is broadband. And I'm glad that the executive director of our regional commission is here, Brandon Davis, because we've worked with Brandon, we've worked with Frederick County, Fauquier County, and other counties in the valley to bring universal broadband to the county. And that project should start in the spring of next year and be completed in the summer of 2025. So the number one complaint that we've had is the lack of broadband, and we're bringing that to Clark County. We're excited about that project. The regional commission has taken the lead on that, and we appreciate their leadership in that on that project. For Clark County, it's pretty big money. We had to put in $5.4 million of our own money. It's over a $20 million project to have universal broadband in Clark County. So just when you look at the cost of that, we were never able to accomplish that until we received the pandemic money from the feds. So that's been a great thing. And then the final thing I would say is we struggle to get citizen engagement. So we like coming to things like this so we can hear how we're doing as a county. We'll advertise a public hearing and one person will show up. We'll have 2 or 3 citizens at our board meeting, and maybe some of my colleagues are jealous of that, but we want to hear from folks. We want to, Michael, I didn't say anything. We want folks to show up at our meetings. We want to hear how they're doing. We want to hear how we're doing. We want the feedback. So we've tried to do different things to reach out to folks. I try to attend as many things like this as I can so I can hear from our citizens. because we're interested in doing a better job, but we need to know where we're lacking and we need to hear that feedback. We have a Citizens Academy that we've started recently that's similar to the program that Winchester has, and I stole some of their ideas for that program. But we want citizens to be engaged. We want them to show up. We're trying to figure out how to do that in a post-pandemic world because we had some participation before the pandemic. Obviously, things slowed down very much during the pandemic, but after the pandemic, we're just not getting people to come back to our meeting. We think maybe that's because we're doing an okay job and we're not screwing with anybody's life right now. But we want to hear from folks. And we want people to participate and trying to find ways to do that. The other thing that we fight, obviously, is there's there's some kind of I don't know how to describe it, but it seems like maybe the crazier you are as a person, the crazier you are on social media, and the more you use social media. So we're okay if people disagree with the decisions we make, as long as they're getting the truth and they understand the decision that was made. And we fight so much on social media, people just lie about things and they make up things. And there were some posts last week about something that we've done that was completely false. And trying to get the truth out, you can disagree with the decision, but I at least want you to understand the decision that was made and maybe some of the factors behind that decision. So that's always a struggle. It's easy to post things and not be truthful about that. So we're always trying to battle that. But I'm glad to be here. Look forward to your questions later in the session, and I'm glad to be with these guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. That was great. Dan Hoffman became the City of Winchester's city manager in September of 2020. Prior to Winchester, Mr. Hoffman served as the assistant city manager for the city of Gainesville, Florida. In that role, he directly oversaw 550 of the city's 2,200 employees across 5 departments and 2 programs, including capital projects, planning and development, public works, transportation and mobility, and technology. Before Florida, Mr. Hoffman was the Chief Innovation Officer for Montgomery County, Maryland, and prior to his time in government, he worked as a consultant for PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to see all of you. So, City of Winchester, which you're currently in, as you all know, we have, I would say, slightly different set of priorities, but I think at their root, there's a lot of commonalities between what you'll hear from, what you heard from Mr. Boyce, what you hear from Mr. Bullhofer, and a lot of that has to do with, how do we manage growth? How do we address aging infrastructure? How do we address economic development? And how do we do that with limited resources? We, in particularly in the city of Winchester, a lot of our priorities are focused on housing. We are 9.2 square miles, so, and we're very much landlocked. So how do we accommodate just under 30,000 people under with that degree of constraint? How do we deal with infrastructure that's been here for, in some cases, 100, 150, 200 years? So that's probably one of the bigger priorities. You'll see a lot of projects around the city to try to address that, but there's no shortage of, when your city is old as Winchester, there's no shortage of things that are breaking that need to get fixed. So keeping up with that's a constant. And then figuring out how do you accommodate growth in a city that is part of one of the highest, the fastest growing areas in the state. When I say that, I really include Frederick, Winchester, Clark County. This region here is growing rapidly. So how do we accommodate that within the city when we can't just expand? We're not going to annex. So how do we approve things to keep a tax base that's healthy and vibrant and that does not stagnate? So I'd say that's one of the bigger areas of focus for us. Of course, frequent complaints we get are around traffic, which if you've ever been 30 minutes, 45 minutes to the east, you'll realize traffic here is not nearly as bad as they have it in other places. But still, your experience is your reality here. So we are always looking at ways to mitigate some of our problem areas, Berryville Avenue, Jubal Early, working, partnering with the state on projects around 81. Uh, Affordable housing is something that you'll hear the council talk a lot about. They've been talking a lot about it. They'll continue to talk a lot about it. Um, that's You'll see some new guidelines coming out from council, I believe, in the next month or two that will create more incentives for affordable housing, but also some minimums for larger projects to make sure that affordable housing is kind of baked into most of the proposals. Although, you can't talk about affordable housing without just talking about the market itself. Uh, I believe we are entering a phase in which the market is going to soften greatly. So, although a lot of folks like to talk about the number of projects we've approved in the last 2 years, um, I think the market will determine how many of those projects actually get built. Very rarely do 100% of the projects that get approved. In fact, I can say never are all of the projects approved actually built. So we're actively monitoring that to understand what the impact will be on public safety, police, fire, social services, and really that market aspect. Obviously, you're all members of the chamber here. You're fans of the chamber here, so you're fans of capitalism and supply and demand. You can't regulate your way into affordable housing. You can't just say, developers, you will build affordable housing here or to this amount. You can control that around the margins, but at the end of the day, supply and demand are really what dictate affordability. So we're trying to figure out what that right balance is, and how the approvals and the projects that we have coming through will achieve some of those affordability goals. Revitalizing certain aging parts of the city. It's not just our infrastructure that, of course, is aging. We have, as an older city, we have certain parts of town that have been neglected over the years. So you will see we've been aggressive in the last 2 years on blight and derelict housing. You'll continue to see us be even more aggressive in addressing areas of blight. That'll be a council priority. It has been and will continue to be a council priority, I believe. And then, of course, public safety. We have a public safety system that is benefited by the fact that we're only 9.2 square miles. We have currently four fire stations to cover that, which is more than sufficient. But the shift in the types of calls we're getting, it's not just fire. In fact, if you look at the number of calls we get for actual fires, it's a small fraction of the calls for service, and it's not a growing fraction either. The growing is for the growing number of calls are all for EMS, and how do we adjust to a fire system that was built for putting out fires, and especially a fire system that was built by volunteers, but those volunteers are going away. As time goes by, fundraising abilities decrease, volunteerism shifts, and as of Tuesday of this week, the city bought its very first fire station in our history. South End Fire Station is now owned wholly by the city, and we intend to build a new fire station, which will be the first station the city's ever built too. And that's just one aspect of what is a dramatically changing public safety network. So we're actively instilling and planning programs to help with that transition and working with our volunteers, but also our career firefighters. We are a vast majority of all our calls are career firefighters. I think, and I don't want to say that's entirely unique to Winchester. I think that transition is happening everywhere, but if you look at, we currently in the city have only about, I think it's 12 to 15 operational volunteers. The vast majority of all of you, if you are in the city of Winchester and you call 911 and a fire truck shows up, there is about a 95% chance that it is entirely staffed by career staff. So slowly absorbing those costs as the volunteer system starts to change and evolve, absorbing those costs is a huge ticket item for the city. So that's something we're addressing. As some of you probably heard, we hired I selected a new police chief a couple weeks ago. In fact, tomorrow we swear in Chief Amanda Behan. Um, I know between the leadership of Chief Piper and now the leadership of Chief Behan, we'll continue to be looking at the way the policing in the city is evolving. Just as we try to address national trends and sentiment of policing, we have, I think we're lucky to have a council that's very supportive of the police department. We have good leadership in the police department, and we continue to fund and actively bolster our police department, but at the same time understanding that their world is changing as well. The types of calls that they have to respond to, where mental health or substance abuse is the primary cause, is increasing. It has been increasing, and we don't see that abating anytime soon. So, actively building stronger partnerships with our nonprofit partners, and we've got some of them in the room today. That's been a priority through funding. We've used a good chunk of our stimulus money on projects to try to help bolster the social, all of our social services, whether they're private, nonprofit, or our Department of Social Services, which we've added, I want to say 10 to 12 positions over the last 2 years. Thankfully, 80% of those positions are paid for by the state, but still, that growth and the volume of calls, burnout in those positions is something we actively have to manage and pay attention to. So I'll kind of leave it at that. Winchester is, it really is a city, not immune to a lot of the issues that any other city would have, and we try to do it on, as best as we can with limited resources and limited space. So with that, I'll pass it off back to Mike.
Thank you. I got this one. Next, we have Michael Ballhofer. He has served as the Frederick County's county administrator for the past 11 months. He received his accounting degree from the University of Florida and received a master's degree in public administration from Troy State University. He is a certified public accountant, and in his previous position at the City of Winter Garden, he served as the finance director from January 2000 to April 2005, and as city manager from 2005 until November of 2021. Thank you, Michael.
Well, I'm the new kid on the block today, so I've got my cheat notes also to make sure I don't forget anything. And I think they've covered most of the major issues. I will tell you, when they hired me, when they hired me here, they hired me because of my experience where I was in my previous position. I worked from at a community that's went from being a small rural city to a larger, more urban city on the outskirts of Orlando. So when I interviewed with them, I explained to them I went through a lot of the issues, and I've been experienced with a lot of the things you see when you see a area going through a transition. And you're seeing Frederick County going through a transition now. It was once a smaller rural county with some industrial. Now you're seeing a lot of people move here, as everyone stated earlier. It's one of the fastest growing areas in the entire Virginia area. So we're faced with all those challenges: how to deal with growth, how to deal with roads, how to deal with infrastructure, of which internet is an infrastructure issue. And we used to call it, where I was, is when you're looking at a community like that, is our elected leaders have to decide, what do you want to be when you grow up? Where do you want to take your community? So when you're at that transitional stage, you're going to have to make those kind of decisions, because the decisions you make now as you grow will determine what you grow into. One of the things they wanted me to look at was from an external side is for many years, Frederick County had been trying to build roads throughout the county. We've been applying for what they call the smart scale grants, but we weren't very successful because we weren't putting in any matching funds. So this board recently was dedicated and determined to be more successful in roads. They put in our last budget $20 million, so we've been able to match these funds with smart scale, with the intention of getting some more roads built. For you that may be interested, we think we're going to be successful in some of these. We're looking at improving exit 317, building what they call a diamond divergent off ramp there to help alleviate that. On exit 313, we're looking at putting in what they call a Michigan turn or a U-turn to try and fix that issue. If you're heading east on Millwood and you try to merge into that right to go down 522, that's kind of you take your life in your hands. So trying to find a way to solve that issue. And Costello on 522, if you're trying to get into Costco's at a busy time, there's not enough left turns. So that's one of our grants. So we've put aside a significant amount of money to match, and we're very hopeful. We think we'll be successful with the state at getting those projects on the list and getting them built rapidly. And I'll say this, when I say built rapidly, I will call that Virginia rapidly, because the greatest lesson I learned moving from Florida to Virginia is that Virginia has mastered the art of bureaucracy. I've met with a gentleman who had spent his whole life here, and he said, look, he told me, he said, Mike, Virginia's been making laws for over 400 years and they like it. So you just have to get used to how this system works. As a gentleman spoke to me before I stepped up here, he said, if they want to change the light bulb here, the first thing you have to do is create a committee to change the light bulb. So it's a challenge here working in Virginia, finding your way to work through the bureaucracies, both at the state and internally with the organization. I think the board has given me a lot of direction on fixing our bureaucracies internally, working with our committees, finding out how to improve ourselves internally, and how to also maneuver the state bureaucracies to get things done. If anyone's out here has ever dealt with the Virginia Department of Transportation, you know what bureaucracy is. They can be a challenge. But I will tell you, in my experience in government and dealing with a lot of other government people, the DOT in every state is a challenge. So that's just common with all states. Another area we're looking at, I think a big project that's very important, it's been on our list on and off for over 30 years, is 37, East 37. It's been on there originally. It was designed to be a limited access, 4-lane divided highway. This year we decided we want to get this done. So we said, let's rethink the whole thing. So we've just recently hired a consultant, and they're going to reevaluate the design of the whole road. Because if you're trying to get a road built that's a 4-lane divided highway with limited access, it's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah, I mean, a lot of money. The only way to accomplish building that would be to get federal funds. And your chances of getting federal funds to build a road that's primarily a local road are slim and none. So we're looking at how we do this road. You know, build the road like you eat an elephant one bite at a time. Do different sections, maybe start out where you get the right of way, but have more on-ramps, more ways to access the road. Maybe even parts will be 2 lanes, but get this road built over time. So we're relooking at that, and we think that the East 37 is a critical link. It's a north-south corridor that's needed desperately over there to alleviate traffic. So we're rethinking it and looking at how we're going to get this road built better. We're also looking at, I think, as Dan was saying, fire, we're in the same boat everybody else is. You're seeing these volunteer fire departments. The volunteer systems just are not working anymore. You can't find the volunteers who are going to respond. So, we're a county of 90,000 people, so that's a lot of firefighters. At a workshop, we had a plan where it said we would have to hire 8 firefighters a year for over 10 years to get up to speed to take our firefighter from a volunteer to a paid force. Our board seemed to be in favor of moving that direction, but you have to find out, how do you fund it? Where do you build the fire stations? Our greatest need for a fire station is out towards the Stevens City area right now. We have limited coverage, so we're going to look and try and expedite getting a station out there. And then we need a fire station in the north area. So that's on our top of our priority list moving forward. Economic development, as you're going through a transitional phase, economic development is very important. I've learned one thing you'll learn up here in Northern Virginia, property rights is very important, very big. And so when you do your economic development, you have to keep that in mind. We want to work hard to try and get some variety of development. We're looking at data centers. I've been told by a lot of people they're not going to bring data centers to this area. I don't believe that's true. I think it can be done. Nice thing about data centers is they don't bring a lot of traffic, but they do bring a high tax base. They don't create a lot of jobs, but the tax base is nice. We're looking at more professional office, manufacturing, different types of manufacturing and clean manufacturing, but it takes an effort on our part with our economic development and to ensure that we have the infrastructure in place, which includes internet service, which we know is in the works, which will make a big difference. I would say the other area where they wanted me to work was also internally within the organization. As this organization changes, when you have a organization that's been working more as a foundation for an 80, 90,000 population county, and now we're going to grow. We know we have over 12,000 residential units already approved. These are on the books, ready to go to be built, and soon in the near future they'll be built. So we know there's at least 25,000 more people coming here when you do the 2.5 per unit. This place is going to grow. We have to prepare for it. So we're going to look internally how we do everything internally within Frederick County. One of the things I've always preached when I was in my previous position was what we want to do is first and foremost, let's look at everything we do and let's see things that are there things we're doing that are adding no value, don't do any good. If they are, let's stop doing them because you'll find organizations sometimes bureaucracy takes a life of its own, and people end up doing all sorts of things that shouldn't be done. So we're going to look at that. Um, we're also going to look at a lot of our internal systems, how we hire employees, and I know one question I'll probably get because I received a letter regarding our budgeting system is we are going to look at our budgeting system. I received your letter on zero-based budgeting, so we're taking that into consideration. But we also, when you look at zero-based budgeting, we want to combine that with a performance-based zero-based budgeting. So you and have both elements. It's looking at cost is critical, but you also want to look at performance. And where I was before, we created a system. It was called citizens-based performance management budgeting. So we got the citizens involved, had them driving it with our board, and then include the cost elements. And we also want to get out more, and communicating with the residents is a tough thing. As I think it was stated earlier, it's a tough world now with social media. We have a lot of people that feel really emboldened to be very mean when they're on social media, and it makes it tough for those of us in the government service, but that's the world we live in. One of the things we want to start doing is getting out there from our staff perspective and our elected leaders and getting out there and going out to the community to HOA meetings, meeting people. So we can't just rely on people coming to our meetings, but to get out there and meet people on an ongoing basis to tell our story. Because if you don't tell your story and tell what you're doing, somebody else is going to tell it, and they may not tell it accurately. But just like everybody else here, we're facing the same challenges, but I can tell you, we are dedicated to becoming a better organization internally and dealing with those external issues. And I'm convinced we have a great future. There's a lot of great things here in Frederick County. I came from Orlando, and I know there's traffic here. Anyone here who's been to Orlando will tell you we may have traffic, but this isn't Orlando. This isn't I-4. It's still manageable now, and there's ways to fix it. Don't do what they did in Florida and wait too long. Address it early, and you'll be better off. But I think it's a great future, and I actually enjoy working here. And at that, I'll finish. Thank you.
Thank you all. And if you have, we got a few questions from the audience. If you have any, please continue to write those down. We also had some prepared questions, a lot of which you guys have already covered, so we appreciate that. If you could, and if John wants, if you want to come up here and help me sort through these questions as we go. If you want to expand more, you're saying, there's a bright future here and lots of opportunity, as we do, but expand more on the strengths and weaknesses, and as we're trying to attract businesses, what the value is and what kind of businesses and industry you would like to see here. I think we would be interested in that.
And we're currently in Winchester when we're focused on a lot of our catalyst sites, and we don't have the space to have a lot more manufacturing. We have a few sites that could accommodate it, but very limited. So we're still focused very much on corporate entities, things that could fit and blend a little bit better into the fabric of what is a very much a mixed use area. Other than Federal Mogul, which is an entire topic for another time, it's not as if we're going to be able to plop another Trex or Rubbermaid somewhere in the city and not really disrupt what is some fairly dense residential in certain areas. So we're very much focused on redevelopment of catalyst sites, focusing on a lot of the health ed types of activities. I'd love to attract another corporate headquarters to the area just to balance it out. I think a lot of the more land intensive, industrial intensive uses will probably still be kind of on the outskirts mainly where the county is, where the county and city meet, which was where a lot of that is now. And then making sure that really the downtown core here remains the economic engine that it is. When people come to visit this area, you know, probably more often than not, they're coming to visit, the downtown walking mall, whether it's for Apple Blossom or other events. Venues like this are a perfect example. This opened up or was developed during COVID, opened recently. Looking up and down the walking mall, we didn't have a ton of businesses go out of business. We have a few long-standing vacancies, like where the Dollar General used to be in the floor place, but those are actually about to reopen as well. So a lot of times, we'll hear on social media mainly, people say, "Oh, the walking mall, no one goes there anymore. It's too crowded. That's why no one goes there anymore." Well, cool. Or restaurants. People say, "Oh, we don't have enough restaurants. We want more retail." The city can't dictate that, but they're not vacant. There's people are coming out, they're engaging in the community. I think there's a lot of pent up energy for that, for those social activities. So I think a lot of our economic growth will still be in that genre.
There's a lot, I think, great assets here. It's beautiful weather, beautiful country. My wife and I are getting ready to go this week and drive around, look at the leaves changing color. So it's a gorgeous place. It has good weather. It's not like it's super hot in Florida all the time or freezing cold when you get up further north. So you have great weather. We have low taxes in this area, relatively speaking. And I know affordable housing is an issue, but compared to other areas, when you go into this area, our housing is still affordable compared to other regions. We have with the regional airport, you have Dulles Airport 50 minutes away. Our infrastructure is pretty good, actually, overall. We have a good supply of water. You're going to find in today's world, there's places you go out west in places, water is getting to be a big issue. And if you don't have water, you're going to have a big problem. So the fact that we have a source of water is a great asset. I think some ways we need to look at better how we allocate that water and how we distribute the water and create better plans. I know occasionally we have those issues with economic development, but that's just managing those resources. I think what's important is that what our weaknesses is we just have to do a better job of going out, finding and selling ourselves to bringing in those great companies. In economic development, you will find the hardest part is getting those first few companies. Once you start to get corporate headquarters and those great companies, the others will follow. So in the beginning days, it's challenging. As you have more successes, you can build off that success.
And I'll just quickly wrap up. I would also say we have a strong workforce. And right now it's hard to say that because everyone needs employees. But when you look across the state, so we're a part of a regional jail and other things, and our vacancy rates are always much lower in this region than our colleagues across the state. So we have a hard-working work ethic here. I think that people are used to working, and I think that's a big asset. I think as we go forward, workforce training will be a big deal because we need to train people for the new jobs that don't even exist today. And I think that's a big deal. And from Clark County, I have to say that agriculture is still the biggest industry, number one industry in Virginia. So my folks would get mad at me if I didn't mention that today. So we're providing land for that agriculture to happen and to help feed our country. So thanks.
All right, next question. We have understanding that 3 jurisdictions have no expectation of merging operationally. Do you 3 work together collectively on a regional vision? If not, why not? If so, how? Start with Dan.
So we speak. We were just on a call together last week. We were all at we had MPO just the other week. So we ran into each other at the jail board meeting. So open line of communication. I don't think there's I wouldn't say that there's a formal kind of one formal strategic planning endeavor that we're all on, but pretty open communication. Let these guys know, hey, I got an issue, or hey, I got a question. Just pick up the phone. And then there are, there is regional cooperation, jail board, water authority, landfill. I mean, there's a variety of different things that we do partner on, and occasionally the idea of merging or doing kind of joint things, whether it's related to Parks and Rec. Sometimes that gets brought up, but it's just not been a priority of, I don't think it's made sense necessarily. Sometimes, the elected bodies, there's just different visions. Our visions are not necessarily the visions of the Board of Supervisors or the City Council. But at a staff level, I'd say we all coordinate, work very closely together.
And I would just add to that, obviously the regional commission is a huge stakeholder when it comes to regional collaboration, and they do a great job of getting everyone together, transportation planning and some things like that. But yeah, Clark County is so small, we wouldn't make it. We couldn't have our own landfill. We couldn't have our own jail. And if you look at places across the state, they envy what we have here in the regional cooperation that does exist. So I think it's important, and I think it is very strong here.
I would agree. Like I said, I've been here a very short period of time, and slowly but surely we've been building relationships, and I can see us working closer together, more of us on an ongoing basis. The more we work together, the more successful we can be. As you know, it can sometimes be challenges when you get up in more the elected leaders, because oftentimes they have very different or divergent political opinions and such. But I think it's still necessary for them to find common ground, because the more we all work together, the old saying is, in a rising tide, all boats rise. So I think we do a great job, but we should definitely work to even do a better job.
You and excuse me, you've all talked about the Board of Supervisors and the school board, and how does your role, how does that all work together? And when there are Board of Supervisors and school board fights that do not happen in Clark County, apparently, how do you fit into that and manage that, and without getting too contentious?
It's very challenging. I will tell you that I do my best to try and bring the groups together. I'm actually meeting with Dr. Lamano tomorrow, talking about it. If those of you may be familiar, there's a big issue over the budget of the school, and try to find a solution for that. And in some ways, I'm kind of the in-between working on that. So we're trying to find solutions to smooth out the process and make it work better. Sometimes you have these two organizations, and they see things completely different, so it's difficult. I think it'll be better this year, and I think that relationship will continue to improve. But it is challenging.
Winchester, there's some little disagreements around the margins, but in general, they work quite well together. I meet with the superintendent at least every other week, and we probably talk on a weekly basis. He was just at our planning commission on Tuesday talking about school capacity. So I'd say they work pretty well together. Obviously, differences of opinion. We're transitioning from an appointed school board to an elected school board, so that's something that they're navigating. But by and large, they work pretty well together.
And I would say within boards, our job is much more difficult as the more divided they are. And so we're part of statewide organizations, and we get notices probably weekly of folks that are in our positions that get fired, who are probably smarter than us and do a better job than us, but because of the political situation in their community, they get caught up in the middle of things and they get terminated. Because you get a new Board of Supervisors in that hated the previous board. Well, we work for the board that is there currently. So if it looks like we're associated with that, we're out the door. So that's probably the toughest part of this job, is understanding where the political winds are shifting and trying to stay ahead of that, because we are in the middle of it, unfortunately, at times. And I think we're lucky to have boards that work together right now, but that could change in the next election. And that could have a really negative impact on the whole community. So.
Well, Frederick County is going to be better this year. That's my takeaway from that. So you heard it here.
I've been working with actually both the school side and our supervisors on that.
Great to hear. Thank you.
All right, question from the audience. Excuse me. Please provide an update on the Valley Avenue road work. This is going to Dan Hoffman. When will it be completed? The road appears to be getting worse and not better.
Well, that would look that way during construction, yes. That's been an incredibly challenging project we've encountered. There's a lot of underground pipe, and we've encountered an extensive amount of rock. So that's created issues. We can't blast during certain times. We have to have the right people to do it. So the contractors had issues with staffing. And then of course, there's the standard weather stuff that we have everywhere. But when we run into delays and it pushes us into certain seasons, sometimes it has to skip. But spring is when we're anticipating, because we'll have to, there will be certain activities we have to stop come winter, but we anticipate having it by the spring.
Another question from the audience, and we've heard a lot of this in the city of Winchester recently, and I think a lot of it has to do with the post-COVID, but your plan to address the growing homeless population, and what do you see in regards to the cause and why it keeps growing?
I won't try to speculate on the cause. There are people way more experienced than I in the room. You can grab them afterwards if you want to know the causes of it, because they see it on a day-to-day basis, whether it's Brandon or Andrea or any of we've got a few, Robin who's here from Watts. I would ask them about the cause. I would say that most of the complaints we get about homelessness, they involve panhandling or things they're experiencing in the walking mall. Whereas there is a need there, I think the manifestations of homelessness that we get complaints about are really generated by a relatively small number of people. The folks that are occupying beds at Watts or programs at the rescue mission, a lot of those folks are the ones that they're not, in many cases, they're not doing drugs out in the walking mall. Brandon, I'll use Brandon as an example. He's got rules, he's got regulations, he's got expectations for his folks. Those are the ones that, we hope get back on their feet. We get them into housing, they change their lives. But what we get complaints about at the city, and we end up dealing with, and really what I think dominates a lot of the conversation, are not the 90% of people that are in these working with these organizations to improve their situation, but it's the 10% of folks that are out here panhandling aggressively or standing on the median out on Jubal Early. And for better or for worse, panhandling is not illegal. The Supreme Court has said as such very clearly. So when I think I get a weekly complaint, why aren't you cracking down on illegal panhandling? That is no such thing as illegal panhandling. There are illegal activities, but panhandling itself is not illegal. Loitering is not illegal. Supreme Court struck down those in many cases as well. So we're working, in fact, we just had a public safety committee meeting last night where we advanced a new ordinance to give me some more tools to address some of the bad behaviors in the walking mall. And hopefully that will, things like that will start to address the visible parts that people see. Whereas a lot of our resources, I'm trying to direct most of our resources to organizations that are actually addressing the 90% of folks who are actively trying to improve their situation.
Got a question from Samantha Barber. How do we work with the city and county? This is mainly for Dan and Mike, but Chris, if you have something as well. How do we work with the city and county to help provide and build affordable housing for residents in our community? Love to have a seat at the table to have a discussion on affordable housing.
I can tell you from my short period of time here, that's not been on the top of the list of things to do in Frederick County. There is an issue with affordable housing, and it's in the entire country. I think Dan alluded to it earlier. There is no easy way to build affordable housing. I think a better way to describe it is what we're looking at is how do we help subsidize housing people that can't afford housing? Yeah, when you start looking at the price of a lot, you start looking at building a house. I can tell you my previous position, we were working in a community building affordable housing. You've got to subsidize it because there's no way to do it without subsidizing that process. One of the things that may help is, as you know, we have, as I said earlier, 12,500 homes scheduled to be built. When the supply of homes is far less than the demand for homes, the price is going to stay high. So I think everything's changed now with the mortgage rates going up, so I have a feeling it's actually going to get worse for a short period of time. There is no easy answer for affordable housing. If somebody wants to meet and come up with ideas, be more than willing to talk to people. But the real question is how do you help subsidize housing to get people into housing?
Agreed. I mean, there are state programs. The city does not, if you come to us and say, I want to build a building that's going to be 100% affordable, great. Go talk to the state about the LIHTC credits, the low income housing tax credits, and that's going to underwrite your project. The city does not underwrite, larger affordable housing projects. We have been using some of our ARPA stimulus money to work on some limited affordable projects, but we don't have the pockets to underwrite, an affordable housing building. Zero Pack is a great example. That project's moving forward. I just immediately before I came here, I had an update on what's happening with Zero Pack. It's still a LIHTC project, which means it will be an affordable project. So really, if you want a seat at the table, it's more about understanding understand what the state programs are, and have financing available. We'll hold your hand and we'll walk you through the process. But it really is something that you have to look at what the state programs are in order to build something. I'll be very quick. Big limitation with Winchester is land. As I said, land's at a premium here. So looking for a large parcel to do a purely affordable project, it's going to be a challenge. So we're happy to talk to those, but the city doesn't really own land. So the best we can do is do a little matchmaking. I'll pass it back to Mike about the county.
Well, I'll give you my card and just give me a call. That's probably the best way to start talking about it. But I will tell you, and you look, this is a national issue. One of the greatest challenges with affordable housing is the way to make housing affordable is to increase the amount of density on the land you have. And you'll see time after time, whenever you try to do a project like that, neighbors oppose it. It creates more traffic. So you run into a lot of problems when you try to go with the higher density. But I'll give you my card and just contact me.
And I'll just quickly say we have to be a little more creative also. So one of the great projects that People Inc. did in Shenandoah County was to take an old elementary school and to repurpose it for apartments. That was a great project, existing old building that was there. We have to look at zoning regulations for in-law suites and things like that. And as Michael said, you get neighbors that complain about those things, but even in the rural areas, are there ways to add some dwelling units? We also have to temper our expectations that every 25-year-old should have a single family dwelling on a lot where you could have a 2-bedroom apartment over a barn as long as it was met the building codes and things like that. So we just needed some creativity also.
I realize it's 1:00. If you have a few extra minutes, we just have a couple of questions left, if that's okay. In one of our surveys, transportation was cited as a barrier to employment, both from the businesses and to prospective employees. And there's apparently, in Frederick County anyway, some MPO money to study the public transit needs. And we were just wondering about the interest from the county and the feasibility of doing that study.
We actually, Frederick County has not been very open in the past, but we just started talking. We were at the MPO yesterday, and they added in some into their new plan. Part of it, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure if you're familiar. It was to start taking a look at where Frederick County could, and probably would have to partner with the city on this. But that was just added into the MPO study, I think, yesterday or so.
And we are starting a route. This Wintran is starting a route down to Laurel Ridge, and that should be starting pretty soon. It'll be an express route from Winchester to the college, but it will then kind of from there. There's other transit systems that connect, so we'll start to create a bit of a hub at Laurel Ridge.
Next question that we have, and Mike, this is really going to be for you. This is regarding the tax assessments. Frederick County tax assessments have sent out. The person was concerned that there had gone, they remained the same for 2021, 2022. Now that we're in a recession, the assessed value has increased by 18%. Tax rate wasn't set yet. This is probably a real long one, but is there any way to address that quickly?
Yeah, they do the tax assessments every 2 years, so they were behind schedule, and they did the tax assessment for the entire county. They used their accepted methodologies, approved methodologies through the state, and they're required by state law to assess it a certain way. So anyone that's purchased the house in the last 2 years and compared the price of the house from the market values, they went up. They really did. I know I just moved up here, and I saw what I paid for my house 11 months ago compared to what it was going for 5 years ago. So they actually did go up in value. So the assessments you have a lot less control over. I know our board has talked about this, and they will be looking at the actual rate. So when you look from the board side, is they'll have to make a decision. Do they want to compensate for that increase in assessed value by lowering the rate? On the personal property tax, there were people upset that their vehicles went up in value, but the fact was used vehicles went up in value significantly. When you looked at the NATO books, they skyrocketed 25 and 30%, but our board just recently, what they did is they actually lowered the rate, and then they're in the process of rebate. So the board will be looking at that, and the way they can address it is through actually what they determine the tax rate. True, and they're two different things. When you're gonna, yeah, absolutely, till November 4th, if you believe it was assessed too high, because that may have happened, they've made adjustments, make that appointment and make the arguments based on why you think that assessment wasn't fair. And I've had people call me, and I've told them, do that. You may have a good logical argument because they're good at what they do, but it doesn't mean there haven't been mistakes. And then people will bring in items or factors they didn't take into consideration, i.e. this land was in a floodplain, or who knows what that issue may be. So that's phase one, deal with that from the assessed side, and then the board will be looking at the rate as we go through the budget process. They're separate, yes.
I know we touched on zero-based budgeting a little bit. That was another question. If anybody wants to follow up and talk about their thoughts on zero-based budgeting, and then I'll just roll that into also how the business community can help you and how we can be more involved and how the chamber can be an asset. If you have any thoughts on that, and I think that would be it for today. So final remarks on those two things.
Yeah, zero-based budgeting. I come from a finance background. I'm not sure if people are familiar with it. First came out in the early 70s, and it originally came out, believe it or not, it was a Jimmy Carter thing. Jimmy Carter brought it in, and it was really a nightmare for the federal government. And a lot of the nightmare was because of the way they implemented it. They didn't have support from the civil servants and such, and didn't work well. And then Reagan came in and got rid of the zero-based budgeting. Since then, they've made a lot of improvements to how they do zero-based budgeting. I will tell you, when you talk to people about zero-based budgeting, 9 out of 10 really don't know what it is. You don't go back and start at zero for every budget. It's really a complex system of creating decision packets based in certain areas, and then you determine your budget based on, you make your arguments for those decision packets. It's being used quite a bit more now, but when it's being used now, it's being done more in hybrid types of ways, where they use elements of zero-based budgets focused on certain areas where it makes more sense, where you have a sheriff's department and salaries. It's probably way too much work compared to what benefits you're going to get out of it. But in other areas, in capital and IT, it might make sense. So what we're going to do is look at zero-based budgeting, but also performance-based budgeting is where I think is actually a little bit more modern, where the real goal is not just costs, but what are we trying to accomplish? When we budget the money, do we accomplish it? Look at your performance measures. If it's not working well, then you know you shouldn't have budgeted money there. And what was the last, or before I hand it, or? I think the most important thing is, and it just not just the chamber, for all business people out there, and we've I think alluded to this many times, is frequently when you go to these meetings, it's the old squeaky wheel syndrome in government. The people that are mad about things or the people that are already upset, they show up to all the meetings, but all the other people that are happy or that have some real issues or they need to show up to the meetings so that the board members can see both sides. That's why I think it's important for us on our side to go out and do an outreach, but people need to participate in their government. If you don't participate in those government, that one small segment will be the only one speaking at meetings, and that's critical. Be involved. I tell people all the time, what happens at the local level is so much more important than at the national and the state level. It's where your roads are, it's where your traffic lights are, it's where they're building next to you. So what happens at a local level is far more important, yet people tend not to pay enough attention to it.
Ditto.
So I work for a bunch of farmers. So in Clark County, we budget based on what we have. We have one piece of debt in the county outside of the schools. So we owe money on one building, and that's it. So the farmers, they save the money over years, and then they do a project once they have the cash, which is just a different way of doing things. But I would echo what he said. You need to learn who your officials are. You need to talk to those folks. I had a lady yesterday from Loudoun County. She's on the Clark County line with us. She was having an issue. She got to me very quickly. We tried to work on her issue, and she said, now I'm going to call your counterpart in Loudoun County. And I thought, good luck, lady, because there's about 10 layers before you get to that person in Loudoun County. But know us, talk to us, let us know your concerns. We all want to do a better job. And we actually would rather talk to you before you come and complain at our council meeting or Board of Supervisors meeting. Give us a chance to try to solve your solution or solve your problem with a solution. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much. I think that was great, and I hope that having a face to the name will help people feel more comfortable reaching out, and hope we can work with you more. And we really appreciate your time. So thank you.